I'm Beverly, 30, female. I live in a quiet suburban town in a small apartment that I've slowly made my own. By day, I'm a bank teller, a job that values precision and order, which suits me perfectly. My life has always been about following the rules and not making waves, especially when it came to my family. But a few months ago, I was accused of ruining the most important day of my brother's life, only to discover his perfect world had already crumbled to dust before I was ever blamed for the storm. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. My older brother, Ethan, was what you'd call the golden child. At 34, he was a successful financial advisor with a flashy car, a tailored suit for every day of the week, and a condescending smirk he probably thought was a charming smile. Our parents saw him as the pinnacle of achievement, while I, the steady and reliable bank teller, was often treated as a dependable but unexciting supporting character in the grand drama of his life. I didn't mind. I preferred the quiet predictability of my world over his stakes existence. Then came Sophia. At 32, she was a marketing director who seemed custom-made for my brother's world. She was beautiful, ambitious, and had an almost terrifyingly perfect social media presence. Their engagement was announced with a professional photo shoot, and the wedding planning began immediately, steamrolling everyone in its path. It wasn't just a wedding, it was a production. The venue was a historic estate that cost more per night than my yearly salary. The guest list was a strategic collection of Ethan's clients and Sophia's industry contacts. Every detail, from the imported flowers to the 6-tier cake, was designed to scream success. My role, as the sister of the groom, was to be supportive, compliant, and available for any task they deemed fit for me. This included everything from addressing hundreds of calligraphed envelopes to attending dress fittings where my opinion was asked for but never actually heard. Through it all, I smiled and nodded, telling myself that this was Ethan's moment, and my job was to help make it perfect. The financial strain of the event was an unspoken secret. Ethan had always been obsessed with appearances, and he was funding this spectacle to project an image of wealth he hadn't quite secured yet. A few months before the wedding, he came to me with a somber expression and a stack of paperwork. He needed a large personal loan for last-minute vendor deposits and asked me to co-sign. "It's just a formality, Bev," he'd said, his voice smooth and reassuring. "The bank feels more comfortable with 2 signatures on a loan this size. It'll be paid off with the wedding gift money." Against my better judgment, I agreed. He was my brother, and despite his arrogance, I loved him. I signed the papers, feeling a knot of anxiety in my stomach that I chose to ignore. The bank approved the $50,000 loan, and the money was deposited into a joint account he shared with Sophia. I tried to put it out of my mind, focusing instead on my maid of honor duties and writing a heartfelt speech I was sure no one would listen to. The wedding was scheduled for a Saturday at a venue 3 hours away. My plan was to take Friday off, drive up, and be there for the rehearsal dinner. But on Thursday afternoon, my branch manager called me into her office. There was a major internal security alert. A batch of fraudulent checks had been cashed across several branches, and the software flags indicated the point of compromise might have been our branch. An emergency odd. It was scheduled for Friday, and as the head teller, my presence was mandatory. It wasn't a request. I was told I couldn't even mention the audit to anyone. I was devastated. I called Ethan immediately, explaining the situation in the vaguest terms I was allowed. "There's a critical issue at the bank, Ethan. I can't leave until it's resolved. I will miss the rehearsal dinner, but I swear I will leave the second I'm done and get there for the wedding itself." The silence on the other end of the line was cold. "A work issue. Beverly, this is my wedding. It's one day. Tell them you have a family emergency." "I can't," I pleaded. "This is my career. It's not a choice." "Fine," he snapped, his voice dripping with disappointment. "Do what you have to do." He hung up, leaving me standing in the sterile hallway of the bank with a pit in my stomach. I spent the entire next day in a windowless room with auditors, my phone buzzing with texts from my mother asking where I was. I answered each one with a growing sense of dread, my focus on the audit completely shattered by the guilt my family was expertly piling on. The audit dragged on until 10 o'clock that night. By the time I was cleared to leave, I was exhausted, emotionally drained, and still 3 hours away from the wedding I was now certain I had ruined. I woke up on Saturday morning in my own bed, a profound sense of failure washing over me. The wedding was starting in a few hours. There was no way I could make it in time. My maid of honor dress hung on my closet door like a silent accusation. I picked up my phone and saw a string of missed calls from my mom and a single, curt text from Ethan that had come in late last night. "Don't bother showing up now." My heart sank. I called him immediately, hoping to catch him before the chaos of the day began, hoping to explain, to apologize, to make him understand. The call went straight to voicemail. "Ethan, it's me. I am so sorry. Please just call me back when you get a chance. I hope you have the most beautiful day. I love you." I then tried calling Sophia, thinking maybe she would be the voice of reason. Her phone also went to voicemail. Her inbox was full. I sent a long, rambling text message to both of them, pouring out my apology and my regret. I explained again that I had no choice, that my job was on the line. I told them I was heartbroken to miss their day and that I was celebrating them from afar. I hit send and waited and waited. The hours ticked by. I pictured the ceremony starting, the vows being exchanged, the first dance. Every imagined moment was a fresh stab of guilt. I tried calling my mom. She answered, her voice strained. "Beverly, I can't talk right now. Your brother is. He's very upset. Mom, please, will you just tell him I tried?" I begged. "Tell him I love him, and I'm sorry." "He knows you're sorry, dear," she said, though her tone suggested my sorrow was insufficient. "But you should have been here. Family is supposed to come first." She sighed, a sound heavy with disappointment, and hung up. The rest of the day was a blur of silence. No one from my family sent a photo. No one answered my calls. It was as if by missing the wedding I had been excommunicated. My best friend Jessica, a pharmacist who worked with Lifor, Death Precision, tried to offer some perspective. "They're being unreasonable," she said over the phone. "You had a legitimate, career-threatening emergency. If Ethan can't understand that, it's his problem, not yours." I knew she was right logically. But logic was no match for a lifetime of familial obligation. I spent the day refreshing Sophia's social media pages, hoping for a picture, a sign that the day was beautiful despite my absence. Nothing. Her normally hyperactive accounts were completely silent. I told myself she was just busy, soaking in the bliss of her wedding day. Finally, on Sunday evening, my phone rang. It was Ethan. I answered with a rush of relief, ready to apologize again, to listen to him yell, to do whatever it took to fix things. "I can't believe you," he started, his voice low and seething with a rage I had never heard from him before. There was no greeting, no preamble. "Of all the selfish, inconsiderate things you have ever done, this is the worst." "Ethan," I tried to explain, "save it." He roared, and I could picture him pacing, his face red with anger. "You had one job, to show up, to support me on the most important day of my life, but you couldn't even manage that. Some crisis at your little bank job was more important than your own brother." "It wasn't little, Ethan. It was serious." "Everything is always serious with you, Beverly. You think your life is so hard. You have no idea. You embarrassed me. You embarrassed Sophia. You embarrassed our entire family. Everyone asked where you were. What was I supposed to say? That my own sister bailed on me?" Tears streamed down my face. I tried to speak, to defend myself, but he wasn't listening. He was just unloading years of perceived slights, using my absence as a catalyst. "I don't want to hear your excuses," he spat. "As far as I'm concerned, I don't have a sister anymore." With that, he hung up. The click of the disconnected call echoed in the silent apartment. I sat there, phone in my hand, stunned. It wasn't just disappointment. It was pure, venomous hatred. The severity of his reaction felt disproportionate, almost unhinged. A cold dread began to settle in my chest, a feeling that this wasn't just about me missing his wedding. Something else was terribly wrong. The week following Ethan's furious phone call was one of the loneliest of my life. I was met with a united front of silence from my family. My texts to my parents were met with short one-word replies. Ethan and Sophia had, I assumed, left for their 2-week honeymoon in Hawaii, and I was left to grapple with the shrapnel of his anger. I sent a formal apology card to my parents' house, hoping it would be forwarded, along with a check that felt pathetic and transactional. Jessica remained my anchor. Let them cool off, she advised, her pharmacist's mind always seeking a calm, measured solution. They're on a beautiful beach somewhere. Once they've had a week of sunshine and cocktails, they'll realize how ridiculous this is. I wanted to believe her, but the sheer ferocity of Ethan's rage still haunted me. It felt like more than just anger, it felt like panic. I couldn't shake the feeling that his fury was a mask, a loud, distracting performance to cover something else. Sophia's continued social media silence was also bizarre. She was a marketing director who curated her life online with relentless precision. It was completely out of character for her not to post a single photo of her perfect wedding or luxurious honeymoon. A week after the wedding, I decided to try to make a peace offering. Ethan had always been swayed by grand gestures, so I decided to send a lavish gift basket directly to their hotel in Maui. I found the resort's information on their wedding website and called the concierge to arrange for a delivery of champagne, expensive chocolates, and a voucher for a couple's massage. I wanted it to be a surprise waiting for them when they returned from an excursion. I gave the concierge their names, Ethan and Sophia, and their check-in date. The man on the other end of the line was friendly and professional. He tapped on his keyboard for a moment before pausing. "I'm sorry, ma'am," he said politely. "I don't seem to have a reservation under that name for this week." My brow furrowed. "Oh, that's strange. Maybe it's under his full name, Ethan Reynolds." He typed again. "I do have a Reynolds here in the system, but the reservation was for last week. It was booked for a 14-night stay in the honeymoon suite." "Yes, that's them," I said, relieved, "so they are there now." There was another pause, longer this time. "Ma'am, the system shows that the reservation was cancelled on the day of arrival. The guests never checked in. The room has been empty all week." The words hung in the air, sharp and cold. "Empty? Are you sure? They were married last Saturday and were supposed to fly out Sunday morning." "I am quite sure, ma'am," the concierge said, his voice now tinged with a cautious sympathy. "The booking was cancelled via email on Saturday afternoon. A full cancellation fee was charged to the credit card on file. Is there anything else I can help you with?" I mumbled a no, thank you, and hung up the phone, my hand trembling. They weren't in Hawaii. They had never been to Hawaii. The entire honeymoon, a key part of the perfect wedding narrative, was a lie. I sank onto my couch, my mind racing. Where were they? Why would they cancel their honeymoon? And why would Ethan pretend they were there, allowing me to believe they were sunning themselves on a beach while he was nursing his grudge? The pieces didn't fit. The unanswered calls, Sophia's silent social media, and now a cancelled honeymoon. It all pointed to something being deeply wrong. Ethan's rage suddenly came into sharp focus. It wasn't the righteous anger of a brother whose sister missed his wedding. It was the frantic, misdirected fury of a man whose world was falling apart, and he was using me as the nearest, most convenient target to deflect the pain. He hadn't been yelling at me from a paradise island. He had been yelling at me from the ruins of his own life. The question was, what had happened to cause such devastation, and where in the world was his new bride? The revelation that the honeymoon was a sham changed everything. My guilt evaporated, replaced by a cold, sharp-edged suspicion. I was no longer the villain in this story. I was a scapegoat. The question was, what was Ethan hiding, and where was Sophia? I spent the next few days in a state of quiet obsession. My work as a bank teller had trained me to notice patterns, to see when things didn't add up. The precision and order I cherished in my job became the tools I used in my private investigation. I couldn't legally access my brother's accounts, and I wouldn't cross that line, but I had another entry point, the $50,000 loan I had co-signed. My name was on that debt, which gave me the right to monitor its status. I logged into my online banking portal and pulled up the loan details. My blood ran cold. The entire $50,000 had been withdrawn from Ethan and Sophia's joint account 2 days before I signed on it. It had been moved into their primary checking account. From there, the trail got interesting. I could see the list of transactions, small, typical wedding, related payments to florists and caterers, and then, the day before the wedding. The same Friday I was stuck at the bank audit. There was a single massive transaction. A wire transfer for $48,500. The amount was oddly specific. The destination was listed only by a routing number and an account number, with no bank name attached. It was an international wire. My banking experience told me this was a deliberate move to obscure the destination. It took me another hour of cross-referencing routing number databases, but I finally found a match. The receiving bank was located in the Cayman Islands, a place notorious for its secretive banking laws. This wasn't a last-minute wedding payment. This was a getaway fund. My mind immediately went to Sophia. She was the marketing director, the image-conscious strategist. She had always seemed more interested in the performance of being Ethan's fiancée than in the reality of it. Could she have taken the money and run? It seemed like something out of a movie, but the evidence was pointing in a very clear direction. I called Jessica and laid out everything I'd found. A wire transfer to the Cayman Islands the day before the wedding. She whistled. "Bev, this is serious. This isn't just a marital spat. This is grand larceny. I know," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "But I need more than just a transaction history. Ethan will just deny it. He'll say it was for a business investment or something. I need something that ties Sophia directly to it." Jessica, ever the practical one, suggested looking beyond the financials. "What about her digital footprint? You said her social media is dead, but is it deleted or just dormant? We spent that evening digging. Her Instagram, usually a curated gallery of her perfect life, was still active, but the last post was from her bridal shower 3 weeks ago. The comments on her recent photos were all from friends and family asking about the wedding and wondering why she hadn't posted anything. No replies. Her Facebook was the same. Then we checked her professional networking profile. It had been wiped clean. Her job title, her company, her entire work history, all gone. It was as if she was professionally erasing herself. The final piece of the puzzle came from an unlikely source. While searching for any trace of her online, I stumbled upon a forum for event planners. A user with a name similar to Sophia's online handle had posted a message a month prior, asking for advice on liquidating assets for an international move. She was asking about the best ways to transfer large sums of money overseas without raising red flags and inquiring about countries with no extradition treaties. At the time, other users probably thought she was helping a client. Looking at it now, it was a detailed roadmap of her escape plan. I felt a chill run down my spine. Sophia had never intended to marry my brother. The entire wedding, the lavish production, was a front. It was a grand, elaborate scheme to get her hands on that loan money. She had played my brother, my family, and me, using Ethan's obsession with appearances against him. He was so focused on throwing the perfect party that he never saw the thief standing right beside him at the altar. And I had signed the check that paid for her escape. Armed with this new knowledge, I felt a strange sense of clarity. Ethan's blind rage wasn't about me at all. It was the desperate, humiliated roar of a man who had been conned. He wasn't just heartbroken. His ego, the very foundation of his identity, had been shattered. He had been publicly played for a fool, and rather than face that monumental humiliation, he had channeled all his shame and fury onto the easiest target available, me. My unavoidable absence from the wedding wasn't the cause of his misery. It was just a convenient hook on which to hang it. He could make me the villain of the story, and in doing so, avoid being the victim of his own. My initial anger toward him began to soften, replaced by a cold, hard pity. He was trapped in a prison of his own pride, and he was using his anger at me as the bars. If I just called him and told him what I knew, he would deny it. He would accuse me of making things up, of trying to deflect my own guilt. His pride would never allow him to admit he'd been so thoroughly deceived. I realized then that my plan wasn't about getting revenge on him. It was about forcing him to confront the truth for his own sake. He couldn't begin to move on, to report Sophia to the authorities, or to start untangling the financial mess she'd left behind until he acknowledged what had actually happened. He needed to be broken out of his self-induced delusion, and I was the only one with the key. But I needed undeniable, irrefutable proof. The wire transfer was damning, but he could still try to muddy the waters. I needed Sophia's signature on the dotted line. This is where my quiet, orderly job at the bank became my greatest asset. I knew the procedures inside and out. For a wire transfer of that size, especially an international one, a simple digital authorization wasn't enough. The bank would require a physically signed authorization form for their records, a crucial piece of paper to protect against fraud. That form would be scanned and digitally filed with the transaction record. The transfer was initiated from the joint account he held with Sophia at my own banking institution, albeit at a different branch. As a co-signer on the loan that funded that account, I had a legitimate reason to request documentation related to major transactions. It was a bit of a gray area, but I wasn't accessing his private data. I was auditing a debt for which I was legally responsible. I filed a formal internal request to view the authorization documents for the wire transfer, citing my status as a co-signer on the source loan and concerns about potential fraudulent activity. I framed it as a standard due diligence check. My manager, who knew me as a meticulous and by-book employee, approved the request without a second thought. 2 days later, a secured, encrypted file landed in my work email. I opened it with a trembling hand. Inside was a high-resolution scan of the wire transfer authorization form. It was all there, the date, the amount, the receiving account in the Cayman Islands, and at the bottom, in clear, elegant cursive, was the signature, Sophia Dubois. But there was something else, something I hadn't expected. Below her signature was a section for the second account holder's authorization. It was also signed. It was Ethan's signature. My heart stopped. He had signed it too. He knew. He knew the money was being transferred. Maybe he wasn't a victim after all. Maybe he was in on it. I stared at the form, my mind reeling until I noticed something. My teller training kicked in, and my eyes scanned the document for inconsistencies. I looked at his signature closely. It was his name, but it looked off. The slant was a little too perfect, the loops a little too uniform. I pulled up the loan document I had signed with him, the one I knew he had signed in front of me. I put the two signatures side by side on my screen. They weren't the same. The one on the wire transfer form was a forgery, a very good one, but a forgery nonetheless. Sophia had not only planned her escape, but she had also expertly framed him, making it look like he was a willing participant in moving the money. She had left him financially ruined and legally implicated. This was the final piece. This was the truth in black and white. My plan was no longer just about breaking through his anger. It was about saving him from the wreckage that was about to crash down on him. I saved all the documents to a thumb drive, printed a hard copy of everything, and placed them in a simple manila folder. It was time for the performance to end. I called my mother and told her I needed to talk to the family. I said I was ready to apologize properly to Ethan in person. I knew this was the only bait he would take. A chance to see me grovel was something his wounded ego would never be able to resist. She eagerly agreed, setting up a family meeting at their house for Sunday dinner. She sounded relieved, hopeful that we were finally going to put this unfortunate business behind us. I arrived at my parents' house on Sunday with the manila folder tucked in my bag, my heart hammering against my ribs. The atmosphere was thick with tension. My father gave me a stiff, awkward hug. My mother fussed around the kitchen, avoiding my eyes. Ethan was sitting in his usual armchair, looking sullen and righteous. He had lost weight, and there were dark circles under his eyes that his anger couldn't quite hide. We sat down for dinner, and the small talk was excruciating. Finally, over dessert, my father cleared his throat. "Beverly," he said, his voice heavy, "your brother is here. We think it's time you said what you need to say." All eyes turned to me. Ethan leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms, a smug look on his face. This was my moment of penance, the scene he had been directing in his head for weeks. I took a deep breath. "You're right." I began, my voice quiet but steady. "I do have something to say. Ethan, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for how everything has played out and for the pain this has caused." He scoffed. "A little late for that, don't you think? Let her finish, Ethan." My mother chided gently. "I know you believe I ruined your wedding." I continued, looking him directly in the eye. "You've told me that you think my absence was the ultimate act of selfishness, and that I embarrassed you and Sophia." "Because you did," he snapped. I nodded slowly. "I understand that's how you feel, and you've built this entire story around that idea. You've made me the villain because it's easier than facing the truth." A flicker of confusion crossed his face. "What are you talking about? The truth is you didn't show up." "No," I said, my voice gaining strength. "The truth is, Sophia didn't show up either." The air went still. My parents looked back and forth between us, completely lost. Ethan's smug expression faltered, replaced by a flash of genuine panic. "That's ridiculous. Of course she showed up. We got married." "Did you?" I asked softly. I reached into my bag and pulled out the manila folder, placing it on the center of the dining table. "Did you really get married, Ethan? Or did she disappear sometime after the ceremony? Is that why there are no photos online? Is that why you never went on your honeymoon?" I slid the folder toward him. The reservation at the resort in Maui was canceled on Saturday afternoon. The hotel confirmed it. The honeymoon suite has been empty all this time. Ethan stared at the folder as if it were a snake. He was pale. "You're lying. You're making this up to shift the blame." "Am I?" I opened the folder for him. Inside, on top, was the printout of the loan agreement we had both signed. "It starts here, Ethan, with the $50 zeros." 0 you had me sign for. You told me it was for wedding expenses. I then laid out the next page, the bank statement, but it wasn't, was it? It was for this. I pointed to the line item, a wire transfer for $48,500 sent to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. It was sent the day before the wedding, and my parents gasped. My father stood up, staring at the paper. What is this, son? Ethan was speechless, his jaw working but no words coming out. This is Sophia's escape fund, I said, my voice clear and devoid of malice. She was planning this for months. She never intended to marry you. She just needed access to this loan. I then pulled out the final, most damning document, the scanned copy of the wire transfer form. She was clever. She even forged your signature to make it look like you were a willing participant, so that when the bank came calling about the defaulted loan, you'd be implicated. I pushed the form in front of him, pointing to the 2 signatures. This isn't your signature, is it, Ethan? He stared at the paper, his facade completely crumbling. The anger, the pride, the arrogance. It all dissolved in an instant, revealing the raw, terrified man beneath. He dropped his head into his hands, and a choked sob escaped his lips. The sound was so broken, so utterly defeated, that it silenced the entire room. My parents rushed to his side, bewildered and horrified. I simply sat there, watching as the truth, in all its brutal black and white clarity, finally brought the curtain down on his tragic performance. The aftermath of that dinner was messy and painful. Ethan's confession came in waves, a torrent of humiliation and heartbreak. Sophia had gone through with the ceremony, smiled for the photos, and then, during the reception, had simply vanished. She'd told him she was going to her room to change her shoes. She never came back. By the time he realized she was gone for good, along with her luggage and passport, it was too late. He had spent his wedding night alone, making frantic calls that went unanswered. The next day, he canceled the honeymoon and drove home, consumed by a shame so profound that he couldn't bear to face anyone. My absence became his lifeline, a ready-made excuse to be angry, a distraction from the crushing reality that he had been abandoned and robbed at his own wedding. My parents were stunned into silence, their world. You completely appended. The golden child was not golden, he was broken, and the quiet, dependable daughter they had overlooked had been the only one to see the truth. The apologies came later, first from my mother in a tearful phone call, then from my father in a brief, awkward conversation. They were sorry for not listening, for not believing me, for being so blinded by Ethan's narrative that they couldn't see his pain. Ethan had to face the consequences. With the evidence I'd provided, he went to the police and filed a report against Sophia for fraud and theft. He had to declare bankruptcy as the loan, which was now his sole responsibility, was far too much for him to handle. His flashy car was repossessed, and he had to sell his condo and move into a small apartment. It was a humbling, brutal fall from grace. Our relationship is different now. It's no longer defined by the old dynamic of the shining star and his shadow. The anger is gone, replaced by a quiet, fragile respect. We don't talk much, but when we do, he listens. He sees me now not as a supporting character, but as a person. The healing process will be long, but for the first time, our relationship has a chance to be built on honesty rather than ego. For me, the most unexpected outcome of this whole ordeal has been a profound sense of liberation. For 30 years, I had unconsciously shaped my life around my brother's, dimming my own light so his could shine brighter. I was the responsible one, the one who never made waves, the one who always showed up. But by being forced to miss his wedding, I was inadvertently freed. I broke the pattern. I realized I had spent so much energy managing my family's expectations that I had forgotten to have my own. Uncovering Sophia's scheme wasn't an act of revenge. It was an act of self-preservation that rippled outward. I had to find my own voice to cut through Ethan's narrative of rage. Life is quieter now, but it's a peaceful quiet. I still work at the bank, finding satisfaction in the order and logic of it all. I have dinner with my best friend Jessica every week. I am slowly building a life that is truly my own, not one lived in the reflection of someone else's. I am no longer just the sister, the supporting act. I am Beverly, and for the first time that feels like more than enough.